Welcome to Shameless Leadership. I'm your host, Sarah Dean. This show is for women leaders who are committed to advancing both their own leadership and the leadership of those around them. In each episode, I offer practical strategies and inspiring stories to help you become a more confident, compassionate, and curious leader. The truth is, you were born to lead. So let's start now, together. Hello, Shameless Leaders. If you are listening in live time, it is right before the end of the year, so the last couple weeks of December. As we close out 2025, we get ready to leap into 2026, probably with feeling varying levels of preparedness among us, little to zero for some of us. I would love to hear from the person who's like, I feel so prepared for 2026. I would love to meet her, ask some questions, take some notes. So I am not her, not feeling prepared. But I am feeling optimistic. I am feeling hopeful. And I actually have been doing a lot of work helping my executive coaching clients, my business coaching clients, some of my leadership group coaching clients get ready for the new year. And I think a lot of them have been surprised with the optimism that I'm bringing into our work together. Because when we look back at 2025, I wouldn't say that it's a year that's given us a lot to feel optimistic about. But I am feeling a lot of hope, and I'm feeling a renewed sense of power. And I mean, in all honesty, this is probably largely in part to being on HRT, and my hormones are better regulated, which is helping with a lot of things. But I also have information and evidence to back up why we can feel hopeful right now. And that's what we're going to be talking about today as we're looking at trends for midlife women moving into 2026. So if you were in Shameless Rising with me, so I'm in the process of leading this 2-part workshop series, and we did part 1 last week, and then we're doing the second part in January. And for those of you who were in that, we talked a little bit about some of these shifts and some of these trends. And as I was putting together content for Shameless Rising, of course, I'm not going to give all that content here on the show because people paid to attend that experience. So that would be like weird and unethical and unfair for me to give everything away here for free on the show. But there is this one part of what we talked about in the first Shameless Rising workshop that I do want to share with everyone here because I think it's really important for all of us to have access to this. So for the midlife women leaders who are listening to the show or want to share messages with other people in their life who are feeling like they maybe need a boost heading into the new year, I feel like this message needs to be out there so that we can have more collective power moving into the new year. When we have hope, we take action. When we take action, things happen. I also have to give the caveat that we can't bypass or ignore the horrible things that have happened in 2025. We can't bypass and ignore the ways that women and all sorts of different groups of people who carry marginalized identities have been, targeted in the last year. That is all very true and very real. That said, when we are on social media and we are watching news media produce messages and campaigns about how limited our power is, we start to believe that. And when we start to believe that, we behave as if we have limited power. And when we start to behave like we have limited power, we start to lose more power. And so I want to be really clear and really careful in terms of how I talk about this because this is intentional. And so when we look at the way that in-groups and out-groups work and navigate in systems of power and in systems of oppression, what we know is that there's an in-group that has the dominant power, and then there's the out-group, which is oftentimes a smaller group that has less power. Sometimes it's a smaller group, but it's always a group that has less power. And so when we're looking at in-groups and out-groups, the in-group has the dominant power. If the out-group starts to gain traction or gain power and the in-group feels threatened, they will have a tantrum if they don't have the self-awareness or emotional intelligence or capability to bring other people along with them. So what we see happening in the world, in the United States especially, what we see happening is we see people who have historically had power, historically been given innate power just born into positions of power by virtue of the color of their skin, their gender, etc. And when their power feels threatened, they don't have the self-awareness, the coping skills, the emotional regulation, the emotional intelligence to navigate the world and process, if my power feels threatened, what can I do to open doors for myself, for others, to bring others with me, to make systems where lots of people can win? Instead, in the lack of self-awareness, the lack of emotional intelligence, the lack of emotional regulation and coping skills, instead, they have temper tantrums and they leverage, wield, and weaponize their power in all sorts of different ways to do anything they can to keep the out group out of power. So what we see basically is people who have more power having literal temper tantrums, like literally behaving like children. And I'm sure you can all think of examples of how you've seen this play out in different political spaces in recent days, weeks, months, and for sure in the last year. And so we've talked about this a little bit before, but when we see this playing out, we have to think about these are wounded little baby birds that don't have the skills to do things differently. So they're doing whatever they know how to do, which is yelling, kicking, screaming, literally like 2-year-old temper tantrums playing out on a national, if not global stage. When we think about it in that space, it's pretty laughable. It's not laughable when we think about how much harm is being done by it, but it's a little bit laughable when we think about, like, these are some grown-ass men doing ridiculous things, and bless their freaking hearts, they're not going to get away with it. So they think they're getting away with it, and they benefit greatly when the out group, women, people of color, anyone carrying a marginalized identity, thinks that they have less power. So when their messaging from the in-group is working and they're having these tantrums and the out-group feels scared and threatened, then we get quiet and we shut down and we're like, oh, I don't want to do anything because I might lose more rights or more power or this or that. So it works really well when we feel very scared and threatened. So it's working well for the media to tell us, and social media to tell us that this is what's happening right now, because it will help keep more people with less power, less presumed power, playing small and being more quiet. And we're not going to do that. We're not doing that anymore. So what I'm seeing in reality, which is not social media and not news media, that's not to say that there's no reality there, but in broad strokes, there's often not a lot of truth telling there. And so what we're actually seeing when we look at what's happening, boots on the ground, what's happening, we're actually seeing momentum happening in a lot of different ways. And that's what I want to talk about today. So let's dig into these trends. So in these trends for women in midlife, we're seeing a handful of things. So the first thing we're seeing is that women are the backbone of all great things. Midlife women are the backbone of all great things. And what that means is we're the backbone of everything. And that comes with a lot of weight and a lot of responsibility. And a lot of it we don't want sometimes, right? But when we look at it in the context of all great things, what we see is that because of our nature and our ability to be stabilizers, our ability to build trusting relationships, our ability to show up and carry empathy and be curious and hold space for others, that we are actually culture shifters, culture shapers, and culture carriers that have a ton of power in organizing, in building community, in building power in movements. And so we see this inside of organizations, we see this in community spaces, we see this within our own households, and people are recognizing and waking up to the value of what women bring to the table because of our ability to do this, because this has been expected of us for so long, which pros and cons to that, many cons to that in terms of the expectation and the weight and the load that has been put on women for so many generations. But the benefit of that is that we know how to get stuff done. We know how to do things. We know how to hold space for multiple things. We know how to manage people's emotion and the needs of a group. We know how to do things that people that don't have the same expectations on them and on their energy, their resources for decades on end are not able to do. And there's increased recognition of this and of the power that comes with this. And so organizations are waking up to the power and the value of this, as are communities. And so we're seeing the value of lived experiences of having to live through so many trials and tribulations and carry space, hold space for so many conflicting demands at the same time at many times. We're seeing the value of people and leaders who have emotional intelligence and steady leadership Steady emotional regulation. So the thing we've always been accused of not having, like women are so emotional, we're actually really seeing play out in live time on global stages that women actually have quite great emotional regulation. And a lot of times men who feel their power is threatened absolutely do not. And so we're seeing the steady leadership capability of women really come into play. And this also allows us to really demonstrate our innate wisdom and the wisdom that comes through what we've had to navigate, again, as generations of women who have had to carry so much. That's the first trend. The second trend is that we are really embracing and modeling reinvention as the norm and not the exception. And I think this is really exciting because it does give us permission and power to spend intentional time thinking about, where am I going? What am I doing? Who am I becoming? And for so long, regardless of gender identity, you pick a career path, you stay in that path, you stay in the same role, the same job with the same organization for decades, if not your entire career. And we're really seeing that reinvention happens for women across different seasons of life, and that in many ways is very ideal and sets us up to have some great benefits. So we are moving as our lives shift and evolve. We're moving through that evolution and shifting and evolving in the way that we show up, in the way that we lead, in the way that we get engaged in our community, in our professional roles. We see that in career reinvention. We see that in choosing new paths. We see that in leveraging different skills and talents over the course of our life, depending on what's going on in our life at that time. And so reinvention as a norm rather than an exception, I think gives us a lot of permission to not be hard on ourselves when we don't follow one trajectory for a long time, or not feel like, oh, I missed the mark because I didn't do the same thing forever, but instead recognize, oh, as I'm growing in my capability and I'm growing in my capacity to perform in different roles that light me up over time rather than staying in one place and feeling stuck or stagnant. And there's a ton of power in that, a ton of potential in that. And oh my gosh, I think it brings so much hope to oh, I can do something that brings meaning to my life based on the season I'm in for my entire life, which is very different than how I was raised with, a mom who did one job for 42 years. And she was amazing at that job, but there was a lot of limitations that she really felt as she hit certain seasons of life in that role. And she didn't see another option for herself. And we now see options for ourselves at every turn and in every season. And that feels really exciting. The third trend that we're seeing for women in midlife, and this one I'm so here for, is that we are having a health revolution. We are having a physical health revolution. We're having a mental health revolution. We're also having a brain revolution. So we're looking at, how do women get the care that they need in different seasons of life? Lots of attention being focused on, what do women need in prenatal and postnatal care that we weren't acknowledging, even when I had my son 13 years ago. It's just evolved so much. We're seeing when we go into perimenopause and this decade-long experience of our bodies changing and evolving so wildly, that we are putting lots of time, attention, research money, studies into what do women need during the season of life? How can we meet their needs? What are the things that are going to give them power? And what are going to be the long-term benefits of that? And we're seeing incredible work in this space. And I think it's so exciting because even just a couple of years ago, this was not happening. There was not the same spotlight. And I feel so fortunate, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, that I've been able to benefit from recognizing that, oh, HRT can really help us, and all sorts of other means of care for our physical health and the impact that has on our mental health. We're talking about mental health. I mean, almost every woman I know is in therapy or has done therapy at some point. There's just this recognition around how we care for ourselves really, really matters. And there's a focus on how we can do that in all sorts of different ways, what's most supportive, what we really, really need. There's a focus on nervous system care. There's a focus on setting boundaries to protect and preserve our mental health. And there's also a greater focus on brain health and what happens in a woman's brain over time and what we can do to protect our brains. And there's a focus on brain health in terms of neurodiversity. So increasingly looking at women in ADHD, women in autism, and looking at, okay, the research and the studies that have been done in those spaces up to now have largely, if not almost exclusively, been done on young male boys. And how can midlife women who were never diagnosed properly get the support that they need And how can there be studies and research for women to get the support that they need? Because I'm a 50, I'm already forgetting how old I am. I'm a 50-year-old woman who was diagnosed with ADHD in her mid 40s and could not get a diagnosis for a number of years because I never looked like a 6-year-old boy with ADHD. And so there's so much shift in that right now. And I think that's really exciting in terms of us recognizing what we need for health and then having increased support around that and lots of attention being put on that and research dollars put into that as well. The fourth thing that we're seeing is legacy thinking is starting earlier and more intentionally. So it used to be that legacy was something that almost started like it either started at retirement or at someone's funeral. Like legacy was something that was only seen in hindsight. So you go to retire and you're like, oh, here's what my legacy was when I pause and look back. You go to a funeral, here's the legacy this person left behind. What we're seeing now is we're not looking at legacy in terms of like how someone left something in hindsight. We're looking at how are we intentionally building legacy as we go. And one of my favorite things to talk about when I'm almost any speaking event is talking with leaders in any capacity that you lead about intentional legacy building and recognizing that you're building a leadership brand and you're building a leadership legacy every day, whether you're thinking about it or not. And so what would happen if you choose to think about that now and do that with some intentionality? And the benefits to that are that you will be more thoughtful about how you choose to do things, when you choose to do things, what you choose to do, how you treat people, how you choose to challenge yourself. And so people aren't waiting until retirement to look back at what their impact was. We're building our impact really intentionally now. And I think that's really exciting when we think of leadership legacy, contribution, visibility, how we're connecting to our meaningful work, how we're using our voice, really intentionally and proactively building this every single day in professional environments and personal environments and parenting environments and in our community environments. And then the fifth trend that we're seeing, the fifth shift, is that our confidence is growing through authenticity, not performance. So instead of performing to build confidence and get other people's approval, we're really seeing a movement in showing up as our authentic selves, having boundaries, using our gifts, showing up in our unique ways in ways that no one else can show up. Shifting away from perfectionism, shifting away from trying to do it the way other people have done it before us, shifting away from women leaders trying to just be like men leaders in like a pencil skirt and pumps, right? Really showing up as real grounded, values-led people who are setting a new standard in powerful leadership. We're owning our quirks. We're owning our zone of genius. We're owning our unique skills and then repositioning our struggles as strengths and repositioning the power that we have as caregivers, as people in midlife, as people with women with neurodiversity, and leveraging the heck out of that to grow confidence. So why does all this matter? When we look at these shifts, why do they matter? They matter because we have so much power. And when we look at messaging through social media and news media, it's easy to think that we only have had more and more power stripped of us because we have had many rights stripped of us in the recent years. But when we look at what's happening, boots on the ground, we have so much collective power, and that power is getting louder, it's getting more visible, and it's gaining more traction. So we need to be thinking through really conscientiously, how are we filtering what we see so that we can stay in our power, so that we're not getting distracted by the things that are really intentionally intended to keep us quiet because we feel scared or threatened. This also matters because this creates momentum for us to pay attention to the right places. If you're paying attention to this messaging that I'm giving you right now, what will you do when you get done listening to this episode versus if you're paying attention to something on social media that makes you feel powerless and then you feel like you can't do anything when you get done seeing that. So when we are paying attention in the right places, we're gaining momentum. And that matters because when traction and momentum are there, we have significant opportunity for growth and progress. Without traction and momentum, that's not there. So again, thinking in group, out group, who wins when I don't have traction or momentum and who loses? So my questions for you as you're thinking through how you're showing up, what you want to do with this information, how you want to participate, uphold, and be a part of these trends. My first question is, who benefits when you play small and feel powerless. My second question is, who benefits when you get loud, when you ask for what you need, when you take action, when you show up authentically, when you challenge the status quo, when you really own your power? Because if we look at who wins in each of those situations, it's pretty clear that you following these trends, being part of these trends, building that traction and momentum, you get to be the winner. And when you're the winner, you get to pick the people around you who also get to win. And then collectively, more women win. And that, at the end of the day, feels like a real great way to kick off 2026. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned something. I hope you took some notes. I hope you feel like now you can go take some action. Listen to this episode more than once. Anytime you need a pep talk in the next year, share this episode out. Thank you for being here. I can't wait to be back with you next week. We're going to continue talking about this end of year wrap up, leaping into 2026. And between now and next week, know that I am in this with you always. Thank you for allowing me to spend time in your ear today. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to this channel. To learn more about my speaking, training, and coaching services, visit sarahdean.com. That's SARADEAN. I would also love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn at sarahdean.com/LinkedIn or on Instagram at sarahdeanspeaks. I love hearing from my listeners. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding space for you today and every single day.